Do we actually know the people around us, or are we just interacting with these carefully crafted characters they play to survive? Well, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to completely decode human behavior. And to make these incredibly deep psychological concepts crystal clear, we're stripping away all the visual clutter and using some simple Stickman animations. Because sometimes breaking it down to the absolute basics is the best way to see the raw, hidden mechanics of the human mind. So let's jump right in. From a really young age, we're basically programmed to trust words, right? We just believe what people tell us about who they are. But the reality is, people almost never speak from a place of pure, unvarnished truth. Instead, they're speaking from ego, from fear, and from this desperate, deeply ingrained need for survival. That surface personality you interact with every single day, that usually isn't the core person. It's their armor. The overly kind person might just be absolutely terrified of rejection. And the one who acts incredibly tough, they might be completely crumbling underneath, just hoping to God nobody notices.
You know, when the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche famously said that profound spirits need masks, he wasn't throwing shade. He wasn't calling people fake. It was actually a warning to not confuse that heavy protective armor with a fragile human being hiding underneath. We all wear masks to navigate society and find acceptance. They're defense mechanisms, stories we've rehearsed so many times that, honestly, we even start to believe them ourselves. But here's the catch. Masks are never perfect. They always have cracks. And that is exactly where the truth starts to leak out.
So, let's peel back that first layer. Those loud, hyper-performative behaviors we see out in the world every day, they are almost always just a massive overcompensation for secret anxieties that people are desperately trying to hide. Take the person who loudly broadcasts their moral purity all the time, or the one who constantly corrects everyone else. They're usually just wearing morality as a mask for superiority, because real confidence and real goodness doesn't need an audience. When you spot extreme behavior on the surface, you should immediately start looking for the exact opposite feeling hiding right underneath.
And those cracks in the armor, they usually show up through a fascinating psychological phenomenon called projection. Basically, projection happens when someone simply cannot handle their own internal flaws or fears. So, what does their brain do? It protects them by subconsciously tossing those exact flaws onto somebody else. It's wild, but we literally hate in others the very things we are most terrified to admit about ourselves.
Think about what that actually means. What someone fiercely hates or constantly mocks in other people is actually a revelation of their own terrifying truth. Judgment is almost never about the other person. It's a confession about the self. That's a huge paradigm shift. The next time you see someone unleashing this intense barrage of criticism, realize that you aren't looking at a judge, you are looking at a mirror, and it's reflecting their deepest insecurities right back at you. So when you hear repeated, excessive criticism, don't get distracted by whoever they're targeting. Instead, trace that line straight back to the speaker to find exactly where their own hidden pain lives. The person who relentlessly belittles others for being too emotional is probably locked in a secret war with their own suppressed feelings. The stated belief is just the shield. The hidden truth is the wound. And once you train your ear to listen for that hidden truth, I guarantee you'll start hearing it everywhere. Okay, so how do we actually spot these cracks happening in real time? Well, there are physical and behavioral tells that totally give away when a mask is failing and inner chaos is taking over. Pay really close attention to things like lip compression. When someone tightly squeezes their lips together, behavioral profiling tells us it almost universally signals withheld opinions or a need for reassurance. It means there's a massive gap between what's in their head and what they're willing to say out loud. And then there are the eyes. Specifically, the blink rate. Now, a normal, relaxed blink rate is right around 15 to 17 times per minute. But if you see someone's blink rate suddenly shoot up to around 80, that is a massive red flag for high-stress deception or profound discomfort. If you bring up a specific topic and their blink rate skyrockets, their brain is literally struggling to process the stress of keeping that mask up. It's a totally unconscious reflex, but it gives the game away completely. But beyond the physical tics, silence often speaks way louder than words. When someone pauses just a little too long before answering, or dodges a topic, or gives this stiff, rehearsed reply to a deep question, that exposes a massive avoidance of vulnerability. True psychological power isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about observing the silence. Because when you just stay quiet, the other person's discomfort grows, their mask slips just a little bit further, and their true fears rush right in to fill that void. Now, this internal fear often manifests as external control, an obsession with controlling the outer world. like micromanaging every tiny detail, or screaming for validation through a highly curated, absolutely perfect social media identity that simply masks a terrifying fear of inner disorder. It's a deep fear of being forgotten, or this underlying terror that if they let go of the wheel for even 1 second, they'll completely fall apart. Essentially, the stricter the outer shell, the more fragile the inner self. If we dig down into the deepest core of the psyche, we find that these masks and behavioral tells are almost always just an endless repetition of childhood survival scripts. Because at the end of the day, people don't generally act from cold, hard logic. They act from pain. A wound happens, the brain forms a belief to make sure that pain never, ever happens again, and then that person spends the rest of their life playing a role just to protect that hidden vulnerability. It's like they say, behavior is just biography. Behind almost every rigid stance or seemingly logical argument is usually just a scared kid trying desperately not to be hurt the same way they were in the past. If someone was never heard as a child, they might grow up to be an adult who just never listens. If they were punished for showing emotion, they become coldly detached. They aren't really acting out their current beliefs, they are just reenacting their history. Their patterns are quite literally a confession of where they were hurt. And this brings us to a really tough pill to swallow. Often, people don't attack because they hate. Actually, scratch that. They attack because they admire. Seeing someone embody a freedom, a confidence, or a success that you were taught you had to abandon just to survive, that is incredibly painful. So instead of celebrating that person, the mask wearer tries to tear them down. Envy is really just unspoken desire. Once you realize an attack is rooted in their own sense of loss, you kind of become immune to all that petty hate. Now, we've talked a lot about spotting these cracks, reading blink rates, and catching projections. But let me be super clear. The goal of this explainer isn't to turn you into some cynical manipulator. Seeing through psychological masks isn't about gaining leverage over people. Not at all. It's about transforming our judgment into empathetic understanding. It's about finding the actual humanity buried beneath all those heavy defense mechanisms. Because once you recognize the scared child hiding behind the aggressive bully or the immense guilt tucked behind towering arrogance, you stop taking their actions personally. You realize their behavior is entirely about their own survival. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. And that shift, it changes your entire worldview. You become completely unshakable. You're no longer reacting to an illusion. You're responding to the truth. You start offering grace exactly where others offer conflict. But of course, this journey doesn't end with just analyzing everyone else, because here is the ultimate plot twist. The more clearly you learn to decode the hidden reality of the people around you, the more unavoidably you awaken to the truth of your own reflection. What triggers you? What are you overcompensating for? As you learn to see through the masks of the world, are you finally ready to look behind your own? Thank you so much for exploring the mind with me in this explainer. Keep observing, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.